All right, good morning. Today it's Tuesday, April 7th. We have one more day of work after this. Huzzah! We're going to start with Blake, who looked at Black Tuesday, and you're going to hear from Blake next. So here we go.
Black Tuesday by Blake Geyser. What is Black Tuesday? Black Tuesday was a total stock market crash on October 29th, 1929. This stock market crash was a major force in causing the Great Depression. Black Tuesday by the numbers. On this historically bad day, investors traded a record 16.4 million shares. They lost $14 billion or $206 billion in today's money. The stock market crash left traders panicked, with traders selling so fast they couldn't keep track. Fights broke out. One trader was even killed, revived, and then sent back to work. The market announced they were in hours behind, so investors did not know how much they lost. Causes. One of the major causes of this was people who bought stocks on loans from the bank. When the stock prices fell, the banks took away the loans, making huge debts to investors. How it led to the Great Depression. The economy was considered to be the stock market. If Wall Street was doing good, then Main Street wasn't going to do well if Wall Street wasn't doing well. The United States had its citizens invest in gold, and they paid each dollar back back in gold, and they feared that they were going to run out of gold. Why was this important? This was important to the U.S. because it sent the U.S. into Great Depression. Millions of Americans lost money and sent them into debt, and a bunch of banks went out of business, which caused huge unemployment rates. And there's my citations.
All right, thank you, Blake. We're going to move on to Jenny. And here comes Jenny in just a moment. Hold on. Okay, here comes Jenny.
The Teapot Dome Scandal. What is it? This is a major business. A man named Albert Fall ran the scandal. He would take in big bunches of money or valuable goods, and in exchange give the payer control of government's oil reserves. Fall would later be found guilty of accepting bribes and was charged as a criminal. Why did it happen? This all started when Fall received a $100,000 check from Edward Doheny, who wanted oil. Due to the huge amount of money that he was given, he wanted to do this so he could keep the money. Falls became greedy and wanted more money, so he continued to do this illegally. Important events. This was a scandal based on bribery. Before World War I, the government took and set aside 2 oil reserves. This was to supply the Navy in case any shortages were to occur. Albert Fall would accept large amounts of money or valuables in exchange for oil. Investigations started, and they found Fall guilty. Fall was the first in office to be found guilty of a crime. Timeline of events. The government took and set aside 2 oil reserves, and this was to supply the Navy in case of any shortages. That was before World War I. Albert Fall would accept large amounts of money or valuables in exchange for oil in late 1921 and 1922. Investigations started, and they found Fall guilty early 1924, and Fall was the first in office to be found guilty of a crime is 1929. People involved. Albert Fall was the main person involved in this. He is the one who took valuables and large amounts of money in exchange for oil. Albert was about the only person involved other than the people who bought the oil from him. Where does it take place? Elks Hills, California, and the Teapot Dome in Wyoming. This is where Fall took the time to investigate an illegal activity. Impacts on society. The impacts this had on society were not many impacts on society, but this did affect the way that Fall looked at the world. After gathering money and valuables, he became greedy and only wanted it for himself. History around the event. The event occurred in 1920s and was a greedy party. Before World War I, the government installed oil reserves for the Navy so that they would have it in case of a shortage. A man named Albert Fall decided to try to gain money through this by bribes of oil. This worked, and he collected a lot of money. Later, he got caught and was charged as a criminal.
All right, pause here if you need to write some stuff down. I forgot to say that before. Sorry about that. But we're going to move on to Connor next.
The Red Scare. What was the Red Scare? A new party arose in Russia and became popular, but unable to be stopped. Within time, they had the entire nation of Russia to themselves. The communists won over Russia, but the U.S. tried to stop them, but didn't succeed. After World War I, the Russians were under a revolution that overthrew the Tsar king, and many people were left hungry and didn't have jobs. This made many people move out of the country and to the countries around it for their own safety. The new people in America started the communist and socialist parties. These quickly were shut down, and those who started it were deported back to Russia for no reason out of fear. Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer was the target of all socialists and communists because of the raids he led to the arrests of people. He has over 800 confirmed arrests, and he was sent bonds in the mail and was criticized for a while after his raids. The Red Scare caused many outbreaks and bombings and distrust in America. All of the attacks that happened were believed to be communist-inspired. Within a year, many Americans had distrust for radicalism and foreigners. Where everything took place in the area of New England, specifically Boston, Rocktown, Chesla, Fitchburg, Lawrence, and Lynn. The Red Scare caused many outbreaks in America that were believed to have hurt its government and its people. And this led many Americans to be more aware of the situation in Russia. And the timeline of events was when Russia was overthrown in a revolution, many people moved to the U.S. and started their own parties. This led many people thinking that the U.S. was taking a turn for the worse, and this led people to work against communism and socialism. Many raids happened, and the parties were disbanded. And this would be an important event for history because later in time we would see it would happen again and again, where parties and immigration would move to America and think of bad stuff.
All right, nice job, Connor. We're going to go to our last presentation for today. That's going to be Austin Woods, and it's him talking about Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart. He forgot to submit some audio, so I'm just going to read it for you. So here we go. Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart. Again, pause here if you need to finish your 3, 2, 1 for the last one. But I'm going to continue as always. Here we go. Charles Lindbergh's childhood. Charles Lindbergh was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1902. His family moved to Little Falls, Minnesota when he was a toddler. But he would end up spending most of his childhood in Washington, D.C. with his dad, who was a U.S. congressman. His flying career. Charles learned to fly planes in 1922 after he quit college. He started as a barnstormer, which is when a pilot who traveled the country doing stunts and selling plane tickets. This was actually a huge thing in the 20s. In 1924, he joined the U.S. Air Force, but the U.S. didn't need pilots at the time. We weren't at war. So instead, he started to fly between his home in St. Louis and Chicago as a male pilot in 1925. The spirit of St. Louis. Earlier pilots had crossed the Atlantic Ocean, but they all had to stop plenty of times to fill their tanks with fuel. Lindbergh wanted to be the first to do a non-stop trip across the Atlantic Ocean. He won a prize of $25,000 by flying from New York City to Paris without stopping. He would later get the right parts for his custom plane to try and fly across the Atlantic Ocean. He named his plane the Spirit of St. Louis because he had a bunch of investors in St. Louis to help sponsor. His journey across the Atlantic. At 25, the Spirit of St. Louis took off at Long Island on the morning of May 20th, 1927. His plane had windows that opened so cold air and rain could keep him alert. 33 and a half hour flight. He didn't sleep well because he hallucinated ghosts during the flight. Landing in Paris. He safely lands in Paris on May 21st, 1927. Over 150,000 people gathered at the French airfield to witness the historic event. He became a worldwide celebrity. When he was back in New York City, he had a parade and over 4 million people were there to see him. Kidnapping. On March 1st, 1932, Lindbergh's 20-month-old son was kidnapped. The kidnappers said $70,000 and he would return the kid. But Lindbergh gave him the money, but he ran off. After 2 months of chasing him, he got away. They found the kid buried and dead. The kidnapper and killer was found, and his name is Bruno Richard Hauptmann. He was convicted of murder and was executed the next year. And Charles Lindbergh died on August 26, 1974. Amelia Earhart, she was born in July 24th, 1897 in Kansas. She attended a private school. Her summers were spent in Kansas City, Missouri, where her lawyer father worked. In 1909, they moved to Des Moines, Iowa, with her younger sister. At a state fair, she saw her first plane and she fell in love with planes. Before she completed high school, she lived in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Springfield, Illinois. Being the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. It isn't really told how she got her plane, but she was inspired by Charles Lindbergh, and she wanted to be the first woman to do it. On May 20th, 1932, she took off from New York City to Paris. Although she stopped once because of dangerous weather, that was the one time she stopped and she took off the next day. The French government gave her a gold medal, and she got to meet the president when she returned home. Unsolved mystery. She was taking her second attempt of an around-the-world flight trip, but one day she vanished. No one was getting radio messages and were concerned. A search and rescue team tried finding her, but never did. There are tons of theories, like she was captured by the Japanese, but we may never know. And actually, with Amelia Earhart, I think they found, maybe talked about it last year, the year before, they found a photo dating back to just before World War II that shows a American woman and American man on a dock. Looks like they're prisoners of the Japanese, and they almost think that potentially was Amelia Earhart, but they're not certain. I think they've found remains on a different couple islands that they think also could have been Amelia Earhart, and I think this I was going to try and find the picture for you, but new photos. Let's see, there was one that showed them like on a dock, and I thought I had like soldiers around them. Prisoner. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, that's all we got for today. And on. Oh, this is the photo. I think this is the photo right here. But it was blurry. And I think there was like Japanese soldiers in that photo too. Maybe. Well, here it is. And then they say the plane, yeah. Anyways, so tomorrow we'll have our quote-unquote vocab quiz. I'm still thinking of something creative to do instead of our typical Google form quiz. We'll probably have something a little more creative instead. But I'll release the details on that for you tomorrow. Otherwise, that's all I got. If you need a brain break, I'm going to post a CNN 10 with this at the bottom. So whether you're do it at the start, sweet. If you haven't and you need a little break, go ahead and take it now to end your social studies class. All right, well, have a great day, and that's all I got for you. Take it easy. See you.